Hello once again everyone, it's Uxwbill here with yet another interesting video, or so I hope at least. For nearly all of the years that I've been on YouTube now, since late 2007 or so, every time I've had a birthday roll around, I've done some sort of a cooking related video. I've done everything from cooking on the manifolds of the 4-burner Plymouth Reliant, now sadly gone, and I really do miss that car, all the way up to making my own Alfredo sauce. Well, this time around, I'm going to work on an idea that's been stewing in my head for a long time. As some of you who make video requests will no doubt very well know, sometimes it takes me a while to get around to doing things. In this case, let's go back to sometime in 2009. I was up in my bed, all snug and tucked away, and watching television. At nearly 2 in the morning, I was watching the PBS Network's Create sub-channel on digital TV, and the show that was on at the time was entitled America's Test Kitchen. They were making some kind of a macaroni and cheese recipe. I thought it sounded wonderful at that time of night, so much so that I almost got up and checked to see if I had the stuff to make it, which of course I didn't. It called for fancy cheeses and things like that I just don't normally keep around here because A, they're probably expensive, and B, most of the stores in my part of the world do not carry these things. But they said I could go to their website to download it. I did, and they did the old bait and switch trick of, you need to register with an email address. So I did that. And I got the recipe. I had no choice but to register. I didn't try to visit any service like Bug Me Not or anything like that. They actually were using some kind of a trick, a server-side trick, it wasn't simple JavaScript or anything like that, to blur the contents of the page so the person couldn't read them until they registered. I'm not one to be deterred or put off that easily, so I made an email account that I would only share with the people at America's Test Kitchen. I signed up for an account, and I got the recipe. As it turned out, they did exactly what I thought they did. At first they said, we'll send you a newsletter. But they never said anything, at least not anything obvious, and I did read most of the fine print, about sharing my email address with trusted third parties, some of which did not provide an unsubscribe link in their communications. And in some cases, especially from some of the emails I was getting from America's Test Kitchen themselves, they didn't honor the unsubscription request. So I must say that while they may have cleaned up their act, and it's certainly not my intention to say bad things about them here in public, I've got to get on a bit of a soapbox about people violating the sanctity of my email inbox. But in this case, it was not such a big deal because I took things into my own hands. I really didn't feel crazy about making that recipe, and then in my travels around the web, I happened across a different version of pretty much the same thing. Any longtime viewer of my YouTube videos will no doubt be aware that I am a big fan of vintage computers, particularly IBM PS2s and older Macintoshes, and so one site that I visit fairly often is the Low-End Macintosh website. Well, as it turns out, they got an idea to do something as part of an April Fool's Day joke where they were going to change the site's theme to something like Low-End Macintoshes in the maker of audio equipment, or Low-End Mac and Cheese. And so they published to their website several recipes for macaroni and cheese, including one that is extremely similar to the recipe that I saw detailed on America's Test Kitchen. Given that I am a big fan of the Low-End Macintosh website, and I have actually gone so far as to support them monetarily in the past with a donation, I feel much better about making their version of the recipe than I do the one from America's Test Kitchen. So that is what I'm going to do for this year's birthday-related cooking disaster, which I am actually already quite late in getting to because my birthday falls on November 30th, and here it is, December 11th. There's nothing like that getting things done feeling, is there? So without further ado, let's get started on this year's birthday-related cooking disaster, albeit a bit late. This is the particular recipe that I chose. Now I'm not going to try to show it to you here in the video, and I don't expect that you'll probably want to follow along with my making it because I can't guarantee that I'll include every last little detail, but I will be including the link to this page on the Low End Macintosh website in the video description. So if you have an interest in trying this recipe or some of the other ones that they have published, please do check the description on this video for the relevant link. Unfortunately, in the time that has elapsed since the last video take, it's become obvious to me that someone has absconded with or purloined, how's those for fancy words, my elbow macaroni, so I'm going to have to venture out to the grocery store really quickly before I can even get started with this. Here are the things that are basically required. Some flour, milk, 2 boxes of elbow macaroni, sharp cheddar cheese, sweet cream butter, Parmesan cheese, and then the specialty cheeses. And these I really thought were going to be a major adventure to find if I could find them at all. And I certainly thought they'd be expensive. As it turns out, I was right on one of those counts. Now ordinarily there's a couple things I won't eat. I tend not to eat anything that's bigger than my head, that I have to look it up in the dictionary, or a foreign language dictionary, or a translating dictionary to know what it is, or anything that my sense of smell says, "Here be danger." Fortunately, I don't think there's anything like that going on here. Two of the exotic cheeses, the 2 exotic cheeses that are called for, and I'm calling them exotic, maybe in your part of the world they're just as common as dirt, but they're certainly not that common around here, are the Gruyere cheese and the Fontina cheese. And like I say, I was really wondering where I was going to find those. Luckily, an area Schnucks store came through just perfectly. They did not have this stuff in the deli aisle, but they were very friendly and very helpful, and it turns out they did have it in the delicatessen. So, crisis averted. Let's get started cooking here. I've already got the oven on to preheat. And I'm ready to use that skillet, and I'm going to start those elbows cooking because I'll need them later. Now, so far, got the pasta cooked. Now it's time to work on the dairy end of things. All this cheese related stuff. So let's get things cooking. Now there's the milk, butter, and flour all together in the skillet. And it's about this time that I confide to you, the YouTube viewing public, that I hope my skillet is big enough, because they said use a deep skillet, and this is definitely the deepest skillet I own. But as you can see, there are definitely some other ingredients that have to be added here. There's the Gruyere cheese. I haven't even gotten to the Fontina cheese yet, but that's coming up next, as is the Parmesan. Meanwhile, the pasta sits and just waits for its turn. There's the cheddar cheese that's gone into the mix. So far so good. My skillet's holding up pretty well, better than I expected. I just put the Fontina cheese in, now let's put the Gruyere in. Just kind of sprinkle that around and then stir it into the mix. Now the Fontina cheese is very soft, doesn't have much of a flavor to it. Whereas the Gruyere cheese, I'd almost liken that to a very dry form of Parmesan cheese. As you can see, it's just stirring in very nicely. Unfortunately, my skillet's had a lot of action, so it's also a little bit out of true with the burner, and so hopefully I won't knock it on the floor before all of this is done. Now for this next step, I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently than the way they recommend, because my skillet simply isn't deep enough to pull this off. It's time to go ahead, come on, and mix up the elbow macaroni with the cheese sauce over there on the stove. And so, whilst hopefully avoiding decorating the kitchen with this stuff, go ahead and add it to the waiting elbow macaroni. And then it's time for old Willie KitchenAid hands to go ahead and mix everything up. Mix it together very well. At which point I'll put the skillet in the sink to be washed, and this big old casserole dish in the oven for a little bit of quality baking time. That should do it right there for a pretty good mix. Now to check the recipe to see what else there is to do. Now the last step is to just go ahead and garnish the top of it with Parmesan cheese. And when last I used Parmesan cheese while I was making my Alfredo sauce, it didn't really come out as smooth as I'd hoped, and apparently the finest teeth on my grater were not sufficient to really get it down to the appropriate size. So several people suggested on that video, or at least one person suggested, it's hard to tell now, that I could actually use a zester to grate the Parmesan cheese. And as luck would have it, I actually do own a lemon zester. If I'm not careful with this, I'll actually zest my fingers, which will not improve the recipe in any significant way. And now, into the oven with you. Alright, let's see, there it is in the oven, getting ready to cook at 375 degrees for about a half an hour or until bubbly. So I'll catch you a little bit later. Well, I hear a stove buzzer. Sounds like it's done to me. Let's check this out. Oh, with my friend Mr. Puppet here. Hello! Turn the oven off. Let's see what we've got. Boy, does that smell pretty good. Whoops. Let that sit and cool for a little bit, and I'll go ahead and dig in. It's looking pretty good, folks. There it is, right fresh out of the oven. Still sizzling away in there. But yeah, it looks pretty good. Go ahead and get a plate full of this going and see what I think of it. And now it's time to sit back and relax with a plate of wonderful hot macaroni that I'll sample in just a moment and tell all of you how it is. Netbook, and of course YouTube's best channel, which still hasn't fallen victim to cosmic pandering just yet. So let's see how this stuff is. I think it's cool enough now that I won't burn myself on video. Of course, I'm not going to edit it out even if I do, because the real stuff is the best. Oh yeah, that is really good. Macaroni and cheese. I would highly recommend this. So thank you for watching, and feel free to leave a comment if you have one.